Good morning, EduFolk, and welcome to this week's edition of the Weekly Review. This week, I am joined by John Gibbs, Brent Poland, and Lianne Lax. I'm just hoping they can all hear me. This week, I've tried to create alliteration out of every single story. So let's see how I've done. We're going to talk about the British Backlash, so British Baccalaureate. We're going to talk about maths paper madness, and we're going to talk about attendance apathy. So lots of exciting things on the agenda this morning. Can I just remind you that our current sponsor is EDAPT, and they are they're not like your typical trade union, but they are a modern apolitical alternative that you can join. They're always apolitical, they're always independent, and if you're looking to join an organization that's going to support you, we actually have some discount codes available, and I just have to quickly look at these. They are, if you would like an annual subscription, the code is TTR annual, all in capital letters, or if you would like a monthly subscription with a 10% discount, it is TTR monthly. So do go and check those out when you have a moment. Right, okay, shall we get going? So British Baccalaureate backlash. Labour says that the idea behind a British Baccalaureate from the Conservatives is a gimmick, and that school leaders should be more concerned about funding and teacher shortage, which of course they are. Not to mention the concrete scandal at the moment. We know that the British Baccalaureate, the idea behind that is to include compulsory maths and English all the way through to 18. As someone who is in the international system, I'm obviously used to international baccalaureate. That tends to be what students do, what students take out here. There is also a thought that private schools could ignore this entirely in favour of their own qualifications. As we've seen recently, some of them are deciding to not do GCSEs anymore. So I want to know, Brent, you're my first person, what your thoughts are on British Baccalaureate. How do you feel about it? What are your thoughts?
I agree with both, actually, which is unusual. I think there are bigger issues out there within education. You know, we've seen that with Rishi Sunak's idea of maths till 18. 1 in 8 classes are taught by a non-specialist. You know, they've got to be practical in what they're doing. I mean, education is like a tanker sometimes. You've got to turn around, you know, years and years of policy. And if you take like children, for instance, they've had years and years of experimentation. Kids going through from age 4 to age 18 don't know the same education system. So I'm sick and tired of these half-baked, not thought out, you know, gimmicks by politicians that don't follow evidence and are more to grab headlines than are A, practical in this world, B, actually, you know, fit for purpose, and C, benefit the children, because they seem to benefit the politicians. It's for the benefit of the children, what our children need. So I do think the baccalaureate has some merit, but it needs to be well thought out. It needs to be well funded. It needs to be given time to be embedded, rather than just simply, this is a quick low hanging fruit headline that grabs the newspapers. Let's increase, it's the same as like, let's increase standards kind of stuff. So I do think it has some merit. I do think we need to look at A levels. So, but for me, you should look at reforming the A levels before you go straight to something else. You know, you fix your house before you renovate it, in my book. You know, before you build an extension. Sorry, that's the thing I would always say, is we have so much in education that needs sorting out before they're going to this.
For sure. I can see John and Lianne both nodding there as well. Now, there's a bit of a conflict here as well, because if you're going to insist on maths and English to 18, then there's a conflict with T levels as well, because the whole T level approach is more vocational, the rest of it. So John, what are your thoughts on how all that would level? If you're going to insist that every student does English and maths to 18, how's that going to work?
Well, we didn't worry that any of this is going to happen. It's all political opportunism, but it's ill thought out, and it's just a reflex action. Uxbridge by-election happened, and a small flame of hope illuminated in the mind of Rishi Sunak as the possibility that he might not go to a crushing defeat next year, as is obviously more likely to happen. So about 3 hours from now, it's Sunday. So about 3 hours from now, 4 hours from now, people will be gathering, chaps will be gathering in pubs in their casual sweaters, or they'll be teeing off all over Britain, and they'll be complaining about things. They'll be complaining about climate change has gone too far, you rather like your car, and migrants, and they really should get tough on that, and and wokeism, and what is that anyway? And someone will say, if there's a gap in the conversation, they'll fall back on an old favourite. Kids today can't add up, can they? No, they can't add up. They don't do sums like what we used to do. And kids can't write properly, and they don't spell properly, and they don't write so on. He's reaching out to Middle England in the desperate hope of survival at the next election, and all those old tropes of. But one thing is absolutely certain: you're absolutely right. The private schools won't do this. The universities will want specialisation probably, and so people who want to get their kids into Oxford and Cambridge and top universities will carry on finding ways of being specialist at A level. And as long as the ordinary people, the great mass of working classes, as long as they can add up properly and spell okay and be productive workers, that's what this is all about. It's just completely political opportunism.
I mean, I couldn't wait to give up maths after GCSE. I can see Lianne smiling as well. And the thought of having to carry it on I'm sort of thinking about my 16-year-old self is absolutely brings me out in hives. But in the rest of Europe, certainly, you know, you can either take maths at a sort of at a higher level or at a lower level. And I'm not sure I have a problem with that per se. Lianne, I don't know how you would feel if you're thinking about your teenage self versus now. Is it something that we should be forcing terrible words, encouraging, there we go, there's a better word, children to do?
Well, I think at that age, should we maybe not give a bit more independent choice to children? Like, which career path do you want to go down? Which subjects will benefit you the most? Or, you know, behavior-wise, I think the older they get, the less they want to do subjects, the harder it is on a teacher. And I think I read the whole article and I took the last quote, which is crumbling schools, recruitment, retention crisis, a postcode lottery of standards. So the thing that came to me is, why must we change things? A bit like what Brent said, why change things? Why not? Let's try and fix things first. Education is hard enough as it is. Again, it seems like a political change, like let me put my mark on it kind of thing. You know, when new management comes in and I'm going to change it just so I can put my mark on it. It seems a bit like that to me. Yeah.
Interesting. And I do think this is definitely a longer conversation, longer than we have time for this morning. But stick with the maths theme, because our next story in a moment is centered around a bit of a scandal to do with a maths paper. Okay, I have titled this one, Maths Paper Madness. 18-year-old Jack Graham recently missed out on a place at Oxford after OCR lost his paper, unbelievably. This is somebody who sat their maths GCSE at the age of 8. And due to the scandal, he was downgraded from his predicted A star down to an A. He is now off to Warwick University to study maths, or Morse, which I can't quite remember what that stands for, but it's heavily maths based. And OCR's comment on this, which is absolutely mind-boggling: we wish Jack well with his studies, but unfortunately this is a nationally agreed approach that when a paper goes missing, you know, we can't do anything about it. So John, I would like to know your thoughts on this. First of all, should OCR take responsibility, or is this just part and parcel of something that very occasionally happens?
Well, it's both those things in a way. It is unfortunately a thing that happens because on the one hand, there's a, well, I'll get to the because in a minute, but on the one hand, there's a sort of you got to feel sorry for this poor kid. He's set his heart on going to Oxford and so on. He's going to go to Warwick. And you say, well, that's not too bad. Warwick's a great place, but we know that actually Oxford offers all sorts of privileges that Warwick and no other university apart from Cambridge can offer. So actually, it's quite a big thing in this young man's life.
Yeah, he wanted to go to, I think it was Lincoln College, Oxford, which many of his maths brains have gone through before. So it was a very specific aim.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's another issue we could talk about, couldn't we? About the dominance of Oxford and Cambridge and the feeling that they do deliver some enormous privilege that other universities can't deliver. Access to all sorts of avenues and doors that will open and so on. That even Warwick, for all its virtues, won't be able to do. And so there's a big, huge change in his life. Now, so when they say we just dealt with this in the normal sort of way, well, the normal sort of way is badly wrong. Exams in this country are not reliable. They're reliable to one grade either way most of the time. Lots of students have their lives directed down one direction or another direction by what is largely, well, it's very subjective choices. And you think, well, they can't be. Well, the one thing that can't be subjective is mathematics. That must be very precise. You can get that wrong or right. I know English literature and history. Anyone could think a thing is good or bad. But maths, that's surely highly precise. Well, apparently not. If you miss a paper, they just sort of look at the other two papers and they say, well, he looks like he was on his way to an A. Well, what's the point of doing any of them? Why don't you just do one question? Why don't you just have a chat with someone? Why don't you just add up a couple of sums and go, well, that probably shows we'll extrapolate from there. It's one of those little moments that exposes a sort of bonkersness about things that we take for granted. And lots of things in our society we just take for granted. Oh, it's common sense. It's all right. He'll be fine. And yet it's unfair. It's unjust. It's arbitrary. And it's highly subjective. And those words could neatly sum up our examination system in Britain, which we shrug our shoulders because most of us do okay and put up with it. 30% of kids leave school having they've got a sense of failure. You know, and that's not just what his name was, this lad Jack, was it? Anyway, not just the lads who get off to Warwick and he'll be fine, but the 30% who leave school having learned what they couldn't do and not what they could do, and been given a certificate that represents their failure. That's an even greater scandal.
Mm-hmm. Lianne, I don't know what your feeling is on this. Do you think that maybe Oxford should have intervened here?
Two things came to mind, and I'm primary, so I don't have much experience in the exam system, but could he not have been given the opportunity to retake it, perhaps? I don't know. And also, like, if that's the only reason he didn't get in, is that the university that you want to go to? This
is kind of the thought that I had. And
do they not want you as a person as well? Are they that old-fashioned that all they want is grades? It sounds a bit like children that are tutored to the hilt in primary to get into the private high schools, and there's more to a person than just grades. Is there more to him than just grades? I don't know, but is that where you want to give your kind of life study to?
Yeah, we had a lot of that in Kent where I used to live, because it was 11 plus land, so a lot of people were highly tutored to get into grammar.
Yeah.
And then there were some who, I mean, fell apart's probably a bit dramatic, but who found it very, very difficult, because it's all very well getting into these places. It's a completely different thing once you're there. Mm-hmm. And Brent, I sense that you're going to have some thoughts. Who do you think is at fault here? Do you think that OCR's comments are just kind of, we don't care? Do you think that Oxford should have said anything here? Do you think that this is an 18-year-old kid and he'll be absolutely fine? And actually, do you know what? Who cares?
As much as I have sympathy for Jack, I have more sympathy for more children further on down whose life chances are, affected by the roulette of an examination system. And you mentioned the 11 plus. I failed my 11 plus. I went to a secondary school. I had what was called rescuing factors. That's called parents, basically, who pushed me. Our education system is basically haphazard. The life chances of some children are determined by, fine margins. And those fine margins could be, and I've seen that in both GCSE and A level, where, dodgy marking, a lack of accountability. We've seen the exam grades not really being what we think they are. I don't think it's fit for purpose any longer. I think in Jack's case, they averaged out his papers, and they averaged out, so he hadn't achieved what I think they did. And it was also about the other subjects, I think physics as well, reading through the story. So it wasn't just on that maths paper. However, the exam board are liable. I'm sorry, legally speaking, they have lost his exam paper. They have paid money. You pay money to an exam board, you expect a service. If they don't deliver that service, like everything else, then you should hold them to account. And I think their glib response, I think, is not taking the tone of the fact that they could be changing the life chances of a young man. However, looking at Jack's abilities and obviously the backup he has, he's going to be the type of individual who should have the ability to recover, I hope, and I wish him well. But it's those people who don't have, another university like he's going to, that never get the chance to. And I saw too many of those when I was a child, at 10 years old who were, who basically felt this, the Carol Dweck thing of they weren't good enough because they failed and they never recovered. And that is, too many people in our system are just natural wastage because the exam system, it just destroys them. And that's it. They go in a completely different direction and their life is never the same again. And that's playing God. I think our examination system plays far too much God. And I think it needs to be a fairer system. And this, for me, just another example of an unfair system.
But it's interesting as well, because it's a story like Jack's, and this is no disrespect to him, but it's a story like his that makes headlines. It's a kind of, it's a middle class story, isn't it? Whereas the children that you're talking about, that doesn't really make its own headline. It kind of might get sort of shoved somewhere into an article. You don't kind of see it sort of saying, well, actually, here are the real people who are missing out here. And again, this is not kind of diminishing what happened to Jack. It's still terrible, but there's a reason that we're reading about him and have whole articles devoted to him rather than the others, because that's what
he has the cultural capital. Whereas the only time we saw those groups being represented was there was just this huge number during the COVID crisis when the rogue algorithm exposed I would say the discrimination that exists in our system, which is set against working class kids, our kids from less affluent backgrounds, our postcode lottery. So unless we get a groundswell of people who are motivated enough to challenge the system, and it goes the same with marking, you have to pay to get remarked, and a lot of schools don't have the budgets to get remarks. And even as we discussed in some of our shows, the remarking isn't exactly what it should be either. But you've got more probability of getting your exam changed, which I think is what this story is probably about, is to put pressure on the exam board to give Jack what he wants. Fine. But there are children out there who can't go to the press, whose parents wouldn't do that. And trying, I would engineer it that Jack gets what he wants. And there's too much of that within the education system as well, of people just engineering things. We've got the cultural capital to do that.
I also, Lucy, I would imagine the word Oxford or Cambridge has a bit of clickbait attached to it.
Yes.
It said student denied Birmingham Place. Is it going to have that much clickbait? I don't think so.
No, you're absolutely spot on. And again, it feeds into everything that we're saying. You're very correct. John's got a pen in the air.
Gesture with my pen. I think I should have a pipe or something. No, just without. But anyway, there's another facet to this, and it comes back to that Oxford and Cambridge thing. Oxford and Cambridge are enormously privileged, the people that go to them, as I said before. And one of the things that establishes that privilege is by sacrificing a few. In other words, you go off to this interview and they say, well, you're very, very bright, but not for us. Or this student, you failed it by the merest margin of such and such. And that's the way you establish your credentials as elite. By punishing, or there's the few gazelles that get eaten by the lions. The rest know they're alive or something. It's kind of, I'm not sure that really works as a metaphor, but never mind. There's a sense in which Oxford and Cambridge have to be. Yeah, I know what I'm talking about. The Oxford and Cambridge have to be ruthless in this way, and clothe it in a sort of cloak of objective fairness. It isn't. It's subjective. It's arbitrary, and it establishes oh my goodness, we just made it into Oxford and Cambridge. So all the kids that go off to Oxford and Cambridge, their parents are so proud of them and such. Like, they don't say you're lucky. It was a mere chance. You could have gone the other way. No, you deserved it, and you made it, and now welcome you to the glittering prizes.
Yeah. There's an interesting one. I think, again, much like with all these topics that we end up discussing, all these news stories, there are longer conversations to be had here. And so look out. I'm sure there'll be some future shows that tackle these in more detail. But in the interest of making sure we fit everything in today, I think it's time that we move on to our next story, which is about attendance. So in keeping with my alliteration, I called this one Attendance Apathy. Just looking recently at statistics from a Public First report, COVID has caused a seismic shift in parental attitudes towards attendance. I think this is something that we're all acutely aware of. Public First has said there's been a fundamental breakdown in a relationship between schools and parents, and this is across the socioeconomic field. But with poorer children being greater affected rather than, being affected the most. And there are so many details in this report that basically say that mental health impacts this, that parents are just kind of at the point where, if I want to take my child out and have some time off, be it to go abroad or indeed not, I'm not going to force them because I can't deal with the emotional fallout from that. There is so much happening here. And Lianne, I'm going to come to you first, because this is something that affects schools, from the earliest EYFS foundation stage all the way through. And I'm just wondering if you've noticed it at all in your setting, in your school.
Yeah, most definitely. The key thing seems to be the willingness that parents want to take kids away in term time because it's cheaper. The excuse seems to be, oh, there was COVID, they weren't in school, they were fine, it's cheaper, let's do it. But I feel like that complaint's always been around. We all know holidays are cheaper out of term time. Teachers have the same issue. And maybe it's a bigger issue than the education industry can fix by itself.
Perhaps. Brent, your thoughts? Because I know you've talked about this previously. I know it's something that's an ongoing theme in your Education Tonight discussions. But where are you at with this?
I mean, it's multifaceted. The thing of it is, it's societal. I think there's an undercurrent now of anti-education in society. It started, we think we don't listen to experts. I go back to the Brexit debate. You talk about Trumpism, anti-wokery. There's definitely a feeling of kind of like, challenging authority and rules as well. The rules don't apply to me. We talk about uniform. Why does my child do this? We're in an age where people get, coffee to whatever standard and order they want. And I think they want the education system to suit themselves. So this concept of an education for the 21st century where everything is child-centered, child-led, I want this, I want that. And the parents are extremely demanding. And to be honest, some trusts, there's on the other side of this, some educational trusts just stop listening to some parents. And so there's a definite sort of two forces that are clashing here, educational trusts trying to regain control and parents who are like, I want what I want, the way I want it, how I want it. And everybody's got an opinion these days because everybody can educate themselves on social media, the Facebook Karens and the YouTubes and everything else. So education used to be the pull and used to be, vital. It's that idea that you go to school, you get good education, you get a good job, you get a good life, the train spotting thing, get a job, get a life. That seems not to be there any longer. I can bypass that. I don't need to go to school. And unfortunately, government policies have undermined education, the lack of funding, the state of the buildings. The subliminal signals is, why bother going at school? And it's fell down to the kids. It's just fed right down to the kids. Because why should I bother? Why should I invest my time in school when the government aren't bothered? There isn't a specialist teacher in front of me. And I think the chickens are coming home to roost. National and culturally speaking, the home of Shakespeare is in trouble when it comes to educating its next generation. And we're the ones who are tasked with trying to turn this around. But we teachers, many of us are saying, I can't do this. I can't be a parent, a social worker, an NHS advisor, a drugs advisor, county lines police officer. Mary and sweet Joseph, what are we in education now? Everything's on us. And when the kid doesn't do well, teacher's fault. No, I teach my child how to read and write. It's my responsibility. I'm the primary educator. It's my responsibility to get my child to school. My responsibility as a parent. Then it's the school. And that's the thing. The problem is, I spoke on national radio yesterday, got destroyed by saying it's the primary responsibility of the parent. And straight away, there are people ringing in going, no wonder the schools are the way they are, because people don't see it as their responsibility. And much like the children, I think a lot of people now are like, it's not my fault. It's not my fault I can't get my child to school. So we wonder why when children come to school, the child goes, it's not my fault. It's not my fault I forgot my pen. Parents saying, it's not my fault my child won't get out of bed. Yes, it is. It's your child. Get him out of bed. Now, the one major thing I would say is sympathy is we have more divergency. We have more SEN. And schools aren't meeting the needs of some of those individuals. I can understand that there are some parents genuinely struggling to meet the need, and schools just can't meet the needs of their parents. That's our issue. It's a big, massive one, this one.
Well, on that note, just looking at some of the recommendations that came out of this report, including communications review, a review of the fine system, joining up of agencies. I remember at university that being called the multi-agency approach. I don't know if it still is, linked to children and schools. And then I've written here in capital letters, funding, as well as investment in SEND and CAMS. And, it comes up time and time again. And of course, funding's going to come up in these reports. John, I'm coming to you for this bit. But do you think that, this is, I suppose, a bit of a silly question in a way, but in the wake of COVID, there were opportunities to do things differently. And this whole attendance issue is a large part of that picture. Do you think that we as teachers haven't, but we have been let down? We have had the ball kind of dropped on us, that nothing has kind of been done to support us in utilizing this opportunity to try and move forward, to try and do things differently, do things better?
Look at the exams. Sorry, John. Sorry, John. Look at the exams. They said, let's get the exams back to pre-2019 level. So let's go back to what it was before. So you're right about change. Sorry, I thought that was to open the floor. Sorry, John. Go on.
No. Brent, you're
John.
No, absolutely. This is a moment in time, isn't it? It's one of those things that historians will write about, that, and it has social, cultural consequences, not only exposing the flaws and unfairnesses in our exam system with the use of algorithms and such like. Kids were kept at home for a long time. When did that happen before? It's something like Second World War. Kids went home and they stayed at home, and their parents looked at that. And they came back to school now, and it's creating. So I'm going to try and take a positive, maybe a positive view of this. There's been, to some extent, an evaluation of what the experience of kids is at schools, and out there in society, they're seeing this tension between their parents expected to have. Well, the parents are. Our culture it elevates choice to a kind of religious level. You have to have choice. You choose things. You have everything is about choice. Brent's absolutely right. And at the same time, as schools and society generally restricts people's choice. Kids have to wear uniforms, kids have to go down certain tram lines, and so on. And out there in society, it's the same thing. There's generally a tension between the illusion of choice and the reality of restricted choice, and particularly when the economy starts to take people's choices away. When you're running out of money, when it's hard to get to live, and so on. So parents looking at schools are asking themselves certain questions about what experience their kid is having at school, and whether they are having a good experience, and whether in the past they might have said, well, just never mind about that, get off to school. We all got to go to school, and that natural acceptance that school must be providing something good, and you can't miss out on any day of it. And now parents, and to some extent kids, are saying, well, maybe you can miss out on some of it. Maybe there are lots of times at school of wasted time. Maybe not all school is a good experience for every kid. And lots of kids who say who are shy, or lots of kids who don't make friends easily, or have learning difficulties of one kind or another, and they go to school, they're not having a nice experience at all. And they're being taught levels of failure, as you said before, about the missing the 30% who leave school with not much at all. And so I don't regret entirely that there is a question being asked about what schools do and what our education system does. The fact that it devolves back to teachers to do something about it, is not at all fair.
Yeah. No, I think, again, this is a much more open conversation. My theory on this is that we're going to see, and it's not going to happen overnight, but classroom teaching, traditional schooling is not going to be the main thing in the future. In a way, I hope I'm wrong about that, but I also think that what we're seeing is more opportunities to do things online, to be homeschooled, to do a variety of different things. And I think that is something that is very open for exploration. I know Tom Rogers has spoken to somebody who worked for a remote school recently. So these things are popping up, and they are starting to arise. There's things that exist out here as well, where children can tailor their curriculums. It's actually a global organization that is basically saying to secondary kids at the moment that you can kind of do your qualifications on the fly, and universities are acknowledging that this, that children can do this, and that is going to work. But then are they missing out on the social side, the side of interacting, again, the side of that life isn't necessarily always about being under your own steam. But again, I think that is a longer conversation for another time. with the little time that we have left, what I would like you all to do is review your Teachers Talk Radio shows of the week for me. And I'm going to first go to, who am I going to pick on first? Brent is deliberately not looking at me now. I'm going to go to Lianne first. What was your show of the week this week?
Mine is the Saturday Breakfast Show with Darren Lester. It was about burnout. There's lots of good tips on how to work through burnout, and who hasn't felt it in teaching before? So it's a very practical show.
Oh, most definitely. Brent, to you next.
Yeah, Maud's Sunday Twilight show, really interesting. I think an underutilized sort of area, field of research is motivation, and especially motivation of teachers. We talk about recruitment, retention, so very thought-provoking. I did my master's degree dissertation on this, what motivates us, you know, and her idea of, well, we can't motivate the teachers, we can't motivate the kids. So we got to look at ourselves first, and I thought that was very insightful. So that was Maud's Twilight show last Sunday.
Lovely. Over to you, John. Show
well, I'd go for Tom's. I think it was last. Yeah, sorry, Tom's. Yeah, Tom's last the Late Show, in which he talked about what to do, or the experience of teachers, what to do if you are the victim of assault or abuse from students, and it's one of those things which is. It's such an important topic because so many teachers are experiencing this and they're not sure it is assault. If you've been pushed aside or you've been shoved or you've been directly assaulted, what then to do? And it's not a problem if you're on the street, you call the police. But if you're in a school, is it a disciplinary matter? Who do you refer to? Will I be accused of assaulting them if I defend myself? It's a highly problematic area and well worth talking about. That was the Late Show last Monday.
Lovely. And for me, well, Tom Hopkins-Burke earlier in the week talked to Alistair from EDAPT, who are our current sponsors. And the conversation was all about supporting teachers and ensuring that they understand that there are a variety of support systems out there, but EDAPT in particular are a non-political sort of union alternative that you can go to seek legal advice should you need to. But the idea is as well that you hope that you never do need them, but they are there if you do ever decide that you do. So it's well worth a listen back to. Alistair is also absolutely lovely. And as a reminder, I've just got to remind you again, and I've got to read them in front of me carefully so I don't get these wrong. We've actually got discount offers available at the moment. So if you'd like a 10% discount on a monthly membership through EDAPT, you can type in the discount code, all in capital letters, TTR monthly. And if you would like an annual membership, it is TTR annual. Please make sure that you spell annual correctly. So that is it from everybody here this morning. It's been a very interesting chat. I always wish we could have longer on these conversations because I feel there is so much more we could get through, but people have places to go, people to see, coffee to drink, etc. So I wish you all a fabulous week. Thank you everybody for joining me, and we will see you again next Sunday where I believe I'm in the chair again, you lucky people. All right. Bye.